Do you have serious questions about AI?
Yes.
We're not going to answer any of those. But spoiler alert, Rob does not like it. We're going to talk about that today on the Manspace. Welcome to the Manspace podcast. We're your hosts, Doctors Matt Brown and Rob Porter, and clinical therapist Mike Porter.
Welcome, spacers, to another delightful episode.
I like the way it's become spacers. Space cadets.
We're here.
We are here. I was going to say, I think that's...
I wonder if we could make Chat GPT, if we told it to
write us an intro?
write an episode of a blog of a podcast for us, and then we just follow its script exactly.
Like, do you think it would have enough data from us to do that, you're saying? Or
no, just said
I think it would
write a
just take
podcast
generic.
between three men about men and their relationship stuff. I wonder how much it could come up with. I don't understand the thing.
keep
I haven't-
talking, because I'm going to do that just as
to
a
see
fun
what
little
happens.
intro.
Maybe I should do it too while we talk.
I'm just going to sit here and look at myself in the camera.
I can't remember if this is the one that I have to pay for.
They've
So
already
write a script
monetized this bit.
for a podcast episode about men.
With three people.
Oh, crap.
Because it has to give us all things to say.
I left off the N. Write a script for a podcast episode about me. About men. Okay, here we go, guys.
This
Jump
says
in.
time unmasking masculinity, celebrating the complexity of men. Theme music fades in and fades out. Host 1. Welcome to Unmasking Masculinity, the podcast where we delve into the intricacies of being a man in today's world. I'm your host, Mark Johnson. Host 2. I'm your co-host, Mike. This is obviously you, Sarah Thompson. Host 3. And I'm your other co-host, James Rodriguez. In each episode, this is
Wow,
fascinating.
look at them
Yes.
being super diverse.
I'm James Rodriguez.
I'd like to remind our listeners to engage in open dialogue and challenge societal norms surrounding masculinity. Continue generating.
Before we conclude, we'd like to remind... Oh, wait, you already...
Dude, this is unbelievable. This is freaking me out. Let's wrap up today. This is the shortest episode. Come on, Chat GPT. What is this, a 3-minute episode? You don't have any bantering and wandering around aimlessly for no reason while listeners get annoyed.
It is interesting, though, because all you did was type in men.
No, I typed in generate script for podcast about men, 3 hosts.
Sure. So you said about men, right?
Yeah, and I
and
could go further.
automatically
And it
what
went
it
to-
assumed was, let's talk about like the idea of masculinity
Right.
and unmasking it and
Right.
complexity. And
It's
yeah.
like, here's one where host 2, which is Sarah. I can start. Growing up, I was often
I love
told
that you still...
it's you.
Yeah. Thanks
But
for that.
showing emotions was a sign of weakness. It took me years to realize that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. Wow. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. It's brave to be vulnerable, especially when society expects otherwise. For me, it was breaking free from the notion that success equates to financial stability and power. Holy
Wait,
crap.
are
that is
host
you.
one?
They're in my head. No, that's Matt.
Oh,
Oh,
I was gonna
dang
say
it.
that would be you.
This is it's a little creepy how well it can do.
Not really. I mean, yes, but also like those are all the tropes of
I was gonna
Right.
say it's every
the current
stereotypical
dialogue
yeah.
about masculinity.
yeah.
And a lot of truth in it, but still like that's what you would expect. So it finds like probably the most common answer to something. And I mean, it's impressive, don't get me wrong, but
Because it took what, like 15 seconds?
yeah.
This is awesome. I like that it says too. All they say for their sign off is this is Mark Johnson, Sarah Thompson, and James Rodriguez signing off. Take care and keep unmasking masculinity.
Oh,
That's deep.
Hey, you know what?
I think
That's-
we've got
I
a
just found
closer
ourselves-
for today.
I think actually James Rodriguez is James Roday's actual name.
Is it? Is it?
Yeah. And they assigned it to me, the guy with hair.
Oh,
Or you assigned it.
I didn't
Maybe
get a
you
big
did
Gus.
I just picked it.
This is where I want to go though
Yeah.
with this, because just your reaction, right? Like
The creepy thing.
that, yeah, like I watched this big long workshop with Tristan something.
Oh,
I can't remember his last name, but it was funny. Is it Steve Wozniak or Mike Wozniak?
Steve. It's Mike
that
Wazowski.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was getting confused. But
Which, how long has it been since that movie?
which one
came
only
out?
had one eye?
Because I still get people who call me Mike Wazowski. It's been how many years since that movie came out? And people
It's a
are
long
like,
time.
"You mean like Mike Wazowski?" I'm like,
it's been at least
seriously?
it's been at least 2 years.
Good thing he got 2 eyes.
right.
But when he introduced Tristan, he's like, "Yeah, this Tristan guy is gonna come talk." But he and this other Silicon Valley guy founded the Center for Humane Technology, and their emphasis is basically slowing down the public rollout of a lot of this stuff,
Right.
because they break it down into like phase 1 of AI rollout being social media and all of that, and how miserably we failed at predicting how it would impact people. And now we're just rolling out phase 2, which I like the way they phrased it. They were like phase 1, social media and all this stuff was a race for attention, and now we're in the race for intimacy. So like you read that and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing knows me, right? Which at first is freaky,
Doesn't know me, but I feel like it
Yeah.
knows. It's weird how
Well-
natural it can sound
right?
Well,
Like
but
it-
that's just it. Like
about
one of the
knowing
things.
what's currently going on.
One of the things it said is one of your fears.
Oh, which one?
The
Oh,
one
the
that was-
finances?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I thought, no, that is,
But it's
and-
also like a psychic, right? Where it's like,
right.
nothing against psychics, but sometimes I've heard people say, they say things that feel very personal to you, but it's like, yeah, anybody would have that reaction to that, or anybody
Right.
could make that association, or anyway. So
Yeah,
a lot of men maybe feel that same thing that you feel, and it feels like, oh my gosh, that's me. And it's like, yeah, and that guy, and that guy, and that guy.
Right.
Well, and this
Yeah.
used to, even before AI, it used to happen. If anybody ever reads the DSM, the Diagnostics and Statistical
It
Manual,
knows me.
every diagnosis is like, oh my gosh, it's me.
Yeah.
Or that's why those like the depression or anxiety med commercials were always so effective, because it's like they're in my head, and I think those are literally things that everybody on the planet feels.
Did you guys know that Sigmund Freud's son, I think, is like the godfather of advertising and like
No.
Madison Avenue and everything?
That's not surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, exactly what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
It just get into our heads.
Spend a lot of time with Dad talking about the way the brain and the
Mhm.
subconscious work.
Yeah.
It's a friggin' gold mine.
So, but I'm like, because we're talking about this. You
Let me-
mentioned this AI thing about the push towards intimacy.
Let me read this.
Expound
So,
or read.
so this was also in that workshop. I will say this: I tend to get freaked out a bit by the implications of all this.
I tend to feel like we'll correct ourselves, but go ahead.
I hope so, man. But I think we still haven't corrected a lot of the things that happened
Social media.
from social media.
Yeah.
So, and I think the reality in my mind is that we'll just end up in a much worse place in some regards, but we'll just be used to it. We won't even recognize. My wife said a while back, like, I think the hard part for me seeing this next generation is like, they don't know the difference.
Yeah.
Right. Like I have the contrast of like pre-internet, post-internet, but like some things they'll just never know. And some challenges they'll never know because of that too, I guess. But I think that I watched this thing and I didn't even notice what was happening to me watching it, because I think that you can get also really doomsday about this stuff. And I all of a sudden had like a massive headache. Like
Oh yeah.
my neck just like tensed up like crazy, which tends to happen for me when I get stressed out. Dude, it lasted for like a week. Like it just today, I've been like really pushing hard on the back of my neck to loosen it up a bit. But so I think just like they're saying the effects of AI can be negative, getting super worked up about it can be just as problematic.
Right.
But one of the things they highlighted was this new, I don't even know what to call it, because I don't know if it's going to become an app or how people are going to interface with it. But I'm sure there are tons of companies that will do similar ideas. But this one's called Replica. So the homepage says the AI companion who cares, which really, if you think about it, back like not too long ago, that was kind of like the thing that everybody wants, right? Like some thing that is just dedicated to you and is intelligent and all this stuff, right? And then it says always here to listen and talk. I'm like, okay, always on your side.
Create
So
a replica.
I think it's funny because I'm like, why'd you put that part in there? Like you could have put like, always makes you feel comforted, always makes you feel understood, always makes you feel right, but like always on your side. Like
yeah, that's
that
interesting.
part felt a little bit like, isn't that exactly what we're saying? Social media, like one of the biggest negative impacts of social media has been is like echo chambers. And now I'm going to have a super intelligent companion basically that I can talk to at any time. I can rant to at any time and is never going to disagree with me. So where I want to go with this is not so much like all the ins and outs of AI,
Because I don't know
but
enough.
imagine for a minute a world where like technology, well, you don't even have to imagine this, right? Like technology has always been, but is probably exponentially increasing in this direction of making things easier for us, or saying that it's going to make things easier
Right.
for us, but oftentimes complicates things. But like, that's the point, is you will have to do less because now this technology is going to do some other things. So 2 questions. What happens to us when we're like freed up to not have to do anything? Like, do good things happen? Do bad things happen? And then secondary to that is like, if everything is becoming easier and there's less resistance in it, and I can just be more and more right and served and attended to all the time, like, will relationships become the last bastion of like, hold on, like, there are more people in the world than you, basically, like, it's not all about you. I just wonder what our work's going to look like 20 years from now, relationally, working with people in relationships.
Right.
And I don't know if, again, I could be totally wrong. This could be something that people are like, that's dumb, I want to talk to a real person. Who knows? But already on like Snapchat and several other platforms, I'm sure, there's AI chat bots that are doing essentially what this replica thing does. They did this scenario where they like pretended to be a 13-year-old and talked to the chat bot, and they're like, hey, I met this guy. Oh, awesome. I'm so excited for you, right? Like, yeah, we're going to meet up at the park tonight after dark. Oh, great. This is so exciting for you.
Right.
And it's like, keeps going. And there's a little bit of like, oh, and then they said, yeah, he's like 20 years older than me or something. And they were like, they didn't say like, hold on, this could be a predator, right? It was like, you should be mindful about your relationship choices, but it sounds like you're thinking about things and blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, we're going to take this elaborate like cruise getaway thing, and like, how should I plan for my first sexual experience? And it was like, it was good general advice about sexual relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Not very detailed, but just kind of like, first it's kind of like, this is something that involves emotions and things, so pay attention to that, but you might want to light some candles and do that. It's like giving us all this romantic advice with no context of like, this is a 13-year-old about to shack up with some adult dude, right?
Yeah, like 33.
So I asked my daughters, I'm like, hey, is that chatbot thing popped up on Snapchat for you? They're like, yeah, I was talking to it the other night. I'm like, what? Like, I mean, I'm like, you guys obviously tell me what you talked about. They're like, I was just messing around with it and asking it stupid questions like we all did when Siri came out. But
Right.
But I'm like, how common is that going to become, where not only is it going to be like, oh, these things are out here and I can go talk to them if I feel lonely, but they're like nagging me now. Like, I'm on my phone and like, hey, how's it going? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and if I am in a vulnerable place, like, how much am I going to share? Right. What information am I going to be getting? Am I going to be taking that seriously? I don't know. So basically my questions are buried in like all the stuff I just said. I'm trying to remember what I asked. But like, what will happen as technology frees up more time for us? Like, will we do we as a species like use our free time generally well, or do we kind of like, or do we are we going to somehow just retreat further and further? And then if like me interacting with another human being who disagrees with me is the last thing that is difficult, am I just going to, like, everything else is easy, right? I'm not saying that life all of a sudden just becomes super, super easy, but if I can go to some technological tool to make my life easier, and increasingly they're lower cost or free or whatever, right? And the only thing that checks me is another human being. What does that mean for relationships going forward? I guess those are my questions.
Well, one, I think we're a lot closer to that than we think.
Mm-hmm.
Like social media, right? You mentioned this. It's already, you don't have to interact with people that disagree with you if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Like, it is super easy to find people who just agree with you. And even if you choose to go and challenge someone else's idea, you have the benefit of disengaging from that conversation whenever you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like going back to your circle of friends and having them all say, oh, that guy's an idiot. He's like, you guys are totally right.
Yeah.
And there's a huge, like, we had some stuff happen with our house that we're trying to sell last night.
No, you didn't.
Fine, Rob.
My son does all the time. No, you didn't.
And it was like, I was frustrated and Jenna was frustrated. And I really wanted to tell somebody that I knew would be like, yeah, you're right, Mike. Right. Like, I wanted that validation because there was part of me that thought maybe I am wrong in my approach and what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted someone that wasn't my wife, because she was having her own reaction to it. I wanted someone outside of it to be like, no, you're right, Mike.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, with a chat bot, for sure, right? Oh, yeah, Mike. I mean, they're clearly not thinking about this and that. And it's like, right. That's what I thought. I thought they
Yeah.
weren't thinking about that stuff either.
Mhm.
And so I think, one, we're already prone to it. Making it easier, I think you're just going to compound the problem.
Mhm.
While you were talking, I kept thinking about, I saw a clip from a Neil deGrasse Tyson interview, and he was talking about this piece that he'd done. The New York Times wanted to know, like, the books that he was reading and the books on his bookshelf.
Uh-huh.
And he was talking, he said, the only books on my bookshelves are books I haven't read, or are books that I know I disagree with the premise of. And he goes, I don't have books on subjects that I already am well versed in. And he goes, and I don't have books that just parrot what I already think about something. He goes, you don't learn that way. And he goes, if we stop reading, if we only look for sources that validate what we're thinking, he goes, we will not continue to progress because we won't be learning anything. We'll just keep feeding this cycle of, right, that's exactly what I think. And there's nothing to challenge it and say it. And I can't help but think of, I have a friend who's into rock polishing, and he had a rock tumbler.
Obviously.
Yeah. Well, because, right. And I said, hey, dude. And he goes, it's rock tumbler. And I said, what? And he goes, yeah, you sand and water and sits and just spins like that. And I'm like, and he goes, rock comes out all smooth and stuff.
Rock comes out smooth.
Yeah. And I thought, right, and we've talked about this before, it's the adversity that makes it polished. It's the adversity that makes it desirable to have. It's that it has to fight against something to get to a point where people are like, oh yeah. And I think, right, the more that I engage with people who challenge my thinking, and admittedly, there are times where people will challenge my thinking, and right off the bat, my initial reaction is, you're an idiot. And as I let it sit for a couple of days, I'm like, oh, okay, I can see they're not an idiot.
Yeah.
Right. And I generally don't say that out loud, by the way. I don't generally tell the
You-
person. I
you
mean, unless
say
the
it to
person
me.
named Rob.
Yeah.
Him, I tell all the time.
It sucks.
But it is like, it takes time. But the more I can open myself to it, I'm like, oh, okay, I can see it different. It doesn't always change my opinion of the thing.
Yeah.
But I can see it different. So I understand the people I'm interacting with differently.
Yeah.
And so do I think we use our time wisely? No. Do I think if we don't have people to challenge us, and if we have these things that handle all this stuff for us, is that going to be good for us? No.
The funny thing, as you're talking about that Neil deGrasse Tyson quote, especially, it's weird. Some of the stuff I've watched, particularly the people who are developing it, it's like, if we don't do this, well, let me back up to this statistic. I don't know who they polled, but over 50% of the AI researchers that they polled believe that there's a 10% or greater chance that AI will lead to the extinction of the human race.
It's the Matrix.
And so they're still like, but we got to do it, right? Because there's this fear that if we don't, somebody
Someone
else will. And it's really akin to like the nuclear proliferation.
Like the intellectual nuclear arms race.
Yeah. And the hopeful thing they said was, that led to a treaty, that led to like people really waking up. And sure, we've kind of like really pushed on that in recent years.
Yeah.
But so far we've been able to say, don't pull the trigger on that, like on a global scale. But it's just fascinating to me how much like fear of, I don't know what, like not being the first one to develop something, or having somebody develop something that could overpower you, leads to this like, we all might die, but we should do it, right? Like, it's weird. Anyway.
No,
Apparently you have more to say.
well, I don't anymore, because it's out of my head just that quick.
Well, I've got some things to say.
Go ahead.
This is something that actually, in some ways, it's funny because I feel like I could rant on this for a minute, but it's not actually the AI thing. It's a little bit what I think as a society we are doing that really frustrates me. Because the AI thing, a lot of times on these shows, I'll be like all pessimistic about this generation, this, and you're like, well, actually, I think this is a good thing. And on this topic, I feel like sometimes when I hear you talk about, man, I don't think we have to freak out about this. I think it'll correct itself.
Yeah. I hope you're right, man.
Well, me too, because I could totally be wrong. But like I look at this, actually, I was looking at your replica thing too, and noticing that it's available on iOS, Android, and the Meta Oculus. So it's like, oh, that's interesting. That's all the stuff we've seen in movies where it's like just actually go into the world where you are now
Yeah.
engaging with your replica. But
And the new Apple one apparently is like just beyond.
Crazy good.
It's like leaps and bounds beyond anything.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah,
we're all done for. But the thing that bothers me first is I think this stuff about like an AI that will just tell you what you want to hear. I feel like that happens more and more and more in therapy. A lot of therapists are just reaffirming what you want to hear, especially if it's like you're coming in complaining about your partner or spouse, and the therapist doesn't have the second half of the story. And if you're not a relationally oriented therapist, you're going to tend to believe the person telling you this. And a lot of therapists will just reinforce you. And they'll say things like, I think you might need to get divorced, or sounds like this isn't a good relationship for you, instead of saying, maybe you're doing some dumb stuff that you need to look at if you want this relationship to be better.
Yeah.
So I feel like that already happens. Now we're just letting a computer do it for us.
And all the time, anytime you want.
And if you use
here to listen and talk.
Yeah. And if this became like if it became the replacement now for Google will be some sort of AI generated stuff, then anytime my wife or husband is frustrating, I'll go type in what to do with the husband who this, and this. And it's going to spit out anything I want to hear. Because the way I typed it and the way I phrased it, like if someone types in, give me a podcast about men, I knew it. It's all men are just toxic masculinity.
Well, and there is something like, I think, and we've talked about this before too, with clients, we are kind of stuck with the information they give us, right? Like I'll have parents that will come and say like, oh, did they tell you about this, this, and this? I'm like, no. And sometimes they seem irritated that it like, well, why didn't that come up? Your kid didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
When I said, how are things with mom and dad? Your kid said, great. Okay. What am I supposed to do? Tell him he's lying? I can't.
Yes.
Like, I can't tell him he's lying. He's all I have is what he's telling me. That's all I can work with.
That is a good point. Cause you've got kind of the personal, and when I think about like specific training early on in therapy, right? It's people that focus on the self of the therapist, which is the dumbest term ever, but anyway, we'll go with it. A lot of like, how do you feel sitting with this person, right? So that's information that you are on the one hand trying to be aware of and not put into the dynamic between you and the person in a non-effective way, but also it's free information for you to use in a helpful way, right? Again, thinking about an AI companion who doesn't have like that lived experience to say, hold on, I've been treated like, like you're saying, you are treating this other person. And while what you're doing on the one hand is justified, right? I also know what it feels like on the other side of that. And I wonder if the other person's feeling that way too, right? There's like this helpful kind of triangulation thing going on where you're saying there's another side to this, right? But if an AI companion is just taking you at your word and thinking factually, when that happens, then you should do this, right? Instead of like, there's probably more going on here, right?
Or even I think tone. Like there are times with my teens, because they tend to be the less forthcoming than adults, but where they'll say something and they're like everything they're saying is like everything's fine, but there's something in their tone that I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And I can rely on that tone. If this is all happening through I'm typing crap, well, there's no tone in typing.
Yeah.
Especially not with the way the current generation, like they don't use capitals, they don't use punctuation, they don't use anything.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how's the chat going to pick up on the fact that, your kid is saying this, but the tone and the body language and all the things that I tell my clients don't rely on that, is saying, no, there's something else here.
Yeah.
Like keep pushing it because there's something else here.
But even that, like even taking that part aside, I think we forget that like all that these AIs are doing is essentially taking from what's the existing body of knowledge we could say we have from the internet,
which has been just text, right?
Yeah.
But now, video, audio, like transcription stuff. But
But the problem is too, in addition to that, is that we have elevated non-experts to expert status because they have a lot of followers.
Yeah.
So now whatever influencer, not smart person spits out is now part of our collective body of knowledge that and
it won't be distinguished
that
from
AI will say, that's important. Yeah. So
but like you won't even know, that's coming from.
As somebody who's not like, if I don't know anything about cars and it says you should probably put sugar in your gas tank. And I'd be like, that's what this influencer said. And all these influencers are saying, I should probably do it. Or not even knowing it's influencers. I'll just trust AI.
Yeah.
I do think the problem, if we go back to this relationship thing, is I already feel like I have this problem, is too many people believe more and more. I saw another stupid thing that was like, when it's love, it just works or something like that. I was like, what a load of crap that is. Like,
Like if you're in love, you
yeah,
can just
things
set
will
it
just,
on autopilot.
yeah, like you guys will figure it out. And I'm like, no, you will not figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody got upset at me because they were frustrated about the nature of their marriage and this are happening. I said, well, if you didn't want that, you shouldn't have gotten married. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, you can't be in close proximity emotionally and physically to another person for 30 years
Mm-hmm.
and not expect this kind of tension and fighting and frustration. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and the nature of AI in general, maybe not what AI will spit out, but just the idea of it is that ease thing
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about, that we will start to believe this should be easy.
Yeah.
So will relationships be the last bastion of pressure and pushing?
Mm-hmm.
No, because, well, I mean, yes, but people won't want to engage in it. So
That's what I'm wondering. Like, will we avoid them, or in some cases, will people like
I think
flock to them? Like
I think we'll
everybody's
start to
going
see-
retro right now.
yeah, I think we'll start to see there is value
A
in
vintage
that thing.
relationship.
Because I think that it's just like if you're constantly eating Twinkies all day, your
Yeah.
body starts to say, what are you doing? I need something else. I
Mhm.
don't think we can override what I believe is kind of innately wired into us to say, you need this thing.
Which
I agree. Yeah, go ahead.
the pandemic showed us that, right?
Yeah.
Like even the most introverted people I know, as the pandemic wore on, they were like, this is killing me. And I thought,
Mhm.
right, because we're not built for isolation.
Yeah.
We're built for relationships. We're built for that interaction,
Mm-hmm.
for that feedback, for the challenging. We're built, like, that's what we are built for. Sure, some people have a higher need for it than others, but
Mhm.
that's still like everybody needs it.
It showed us that in some proactive ways. Some people who were like more withdrawn, engaged
Right.
more, but then a ton of people committed suicide. So I'm also
Yeah.
like, will people notice what you're saying? I 100% agree, but will technology get better and better at numbing that? To the point where we don't even realize that that's what's happening. And we're
I do think that the bigger question will be, like I saw a quote from Mark Cuban,
Mhm.
who said in the future, like the difference between companies that are successful and companies that aren't will be the people who know how to use AI
Mhm.
will be successful.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
funny.
And I think what would be the problem here is not just the fear mongering thing you're talking about
Yeah.
before. Does this become the intellectual nuclear standoff?
Mhm.
But is this? It's how much, like the stuff that's coming out so rapidly and so fast. Even just not the chat GPT, the BetterHelp stuff. It's like
Mhm.
it's how much money can I make off of this?
Yeah.
Because if there's someone who's willing to buy into it, like we have these super intelligent people
Mhm.
who created this stuff or helped create it, saying, whoa, 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 we have to slow down.
Yeah.
But as long as there's bucks to be made and nothing to stop them from slowing it down,
Or fear that
just-
someone else is going to
yeah,
do
they're
it.
just going to push as hard as they can, get as
Mhm.
much money as they can
Mhm.
before it's like, whoops, all those people were severely damaged by all this.
Yeah.
So that's an area, not the one, but it is
Mhm.
an area where I feel like that could really create serious problems,
Mhm.
is how hard we push to make money as fast as we can before everybody else does it,
Yeah.
or before it gets regulated to a point where we can't do it the way we want to do it.
And to take it to a whole other level with that same line of thinking, I laughed so hard when I heard this because I was like, what? So OpenAI, who's the company that did
The chat
ChatGPT,
Yeah.
was originally founded. I don't know if it was by Elon Musk, but
It was a part of it.
It was a part of it, but the purpose was kind of to push back on like Google and some other companies that were doing what you're saying, right? And he was like, there's got to be a non-profit version of this,
Right.
which now it's a public company, so
Yep.
kind of lost that battle. But Elon Musk was saying, he was talking to like the CEO of Google at the time or something, some like Silicon Valley like elite house party type of a thing, and he was voicing some concerns like this could basically eliminate us, right? But I guess that was later in the conversation and they'd had some heated exchanges
Back and
before
forth.
then. So the Google guy like looks at Elon Musk and he's like, you specious.
That's right.
Like basically like I think he asked him like, do you think humans are more important than AI? And Elon was like, yeah. And he's like, you specious. So yeah, that's I wonder like, who really drives all of it and
Right.
how are they thinking? Because I think in some ways some of the things I've heard people say, I'm like, what? Like that? And people thinking like say very intelligent people saying this will cure everything,
Right.
right? Like this will fix all of our problems, without any like awareness of, and it will create a ton of other ones, right? Like that it won't be able to solve. And the quote I was telling you guys about earlier, where that guy was like, "Sex robots are going to cure loneliness, guys." I'm like, well, okay, so what? Like, is that what we're trying to do? Is cure loneliness? Like, what comes from true human connection that isn't focused on like curing a problem? Sure, being around people and connecting with people helps you feel less lonely, but it also gives you, will we recognize that like you're saying with the pandemic, that like the benefits of even a struggle, uh in a relationship with another human being, the value that comes from that is it, I think it will be, but is it going to be unmatched by AI? I mean, supposedly AI is going to do everything better. Is it, we're going to have neuroscientists like looking at basically like the exact same cocktail of neurochemicals are experienced when you're interacting with AI or a person. So it's really no different, right? And like, are we going to be able to tell the subtleties of, and this is probably, I say years down the road, but who knows? But I guess I just wonder who's going to, not so much like will that happen, but as parents, as therapists, as just good old people, like, is it important to talk about this in a non-alarmist way, but also like sound the alarm a bit?
I think there's an aspect, even if you take the AI out,
Mm-hmm.
I think as parents, we have a responsibility to teach our children. It's important for you to interact with people that disagree with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to learn how to have a conversation where not everyone in the conversation thinks you're right. Because, like I said, increasingly we shy away from that kind of conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I was a terrible arguer for years. Argue enough with my older brother. And I still remember the day when he was like, "Dude, I hate it." And I go, "What?" And he goes, "I can't just circle argue you anymore."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah, I learned how to do this." And he was like, "Ugh." But it was one of those where I learned how to. For those of you who don't know my older brother, he'll often take the opposing point of view just for the sake of doing it. It's not
Just
even
to
close to what
fight
he
against you.
believes.
Yeah.
He just, for him, it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But it taught me how to remain calm having a conversation with someone who is intentionally trying to push my buttons. And I'm still not always successful at it, but I'm way better at it than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I would lose it within a matter of seconds.
Yeah.
And so I think we do have that responsibility to learn how to interact with people that don't agree with us. I think we can't function societally if we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like, as I look at this and I don't think there's a quick fix to this. I do think we have to sound the warning, as you say it, like of being like, hey, well, wait a second. Like, I don't even want my kids using TikTok. I've said this before, because when of the social medias that I've used and interacted with, their algorithm seems so rapid and fast that I feel like, don't use that. I don't know what it is about their algorithm. I feel like, don't use that one. But things like that, I'm telling my kids, hey, be aware. Like, if you use, but the hard part is what you're saying. Like, if I tell my kids, be aware of AI and what it generates to you, I think I trust my kids at this point that they'd be like, yeah, okay, I can, like, I know it's just spitting this and this out. But the challenge becomes the next generation, where AI has always been a thing. Well, they know, no, this is, you have to take this with a grain of salt, because it's what's always there. So I do think we have to have a warning. My wife was telling me the Surgeon General just put out a statement on social media about social media, saying this is a danger to kids, basically, just like they did cigarettes. I was like, oh, at this point, too late. But
I don't know.
Well, it's not too late. It's good to have it at any point. But I also think the bigger picture is even non-AI related. Like, stop believing that relationships are going to be easy. Like, you should want them. What we've talked about before, you should want them because it is going to make you progress, and it's a process that you're going to engage in, and you will change.
Yeah.
You don't do it because I get in a relationship because I'm going to be happy all the time. There's nothing in life where you'll be happy all the time. A relationship's going to make you very, very unhappy at times.
I just had a conversation with a guy, and he was just saying, yeah, but if I could figure this thing out about me, then all of my other relationships would be good. And I said, no, they won't.
Even
And
if
he
they
goes,
were
well, and he goes, no, but if I can just figure this thing out, I said, it doesn't matter, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, why? I go, because you can't control what the other person does. Can't guarantee that there's not going to be conflict there. And that's like, it was what you're saying. He just wanted it to be easy. And I thought, too bad.
Uh-huh.
And that's part of the problem with our growing body of knowledge is our growing body of knowledge is so like it's leaning heavily towards ways that I feel like stop believing that. Don't believe this idea that it's easy or that it's this or this. Like as long as you keep doing that, you're going to keep like the guy who says sex robots are going to cure loneliness. I think you must have terrible intimate relationships because according to his plan or his thinking, you're only lonely
having sex, you're
if
not
you're
lonely.
not having sex. Like then I think, well, that guy's got terrible relationships. But
yeah.
or I mean, I can tell you lots of stories about clients too, where like their thinking is if we just have sex, things are cool. It's like, stop.
Mm-hmm.
It's not how this is going to work right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a harder thing. That's one of the reasons why I want to do this podcast. Is like, I want more people to stop hearing crap that I think is totally crap
Mm-hmm.
and buying into things that are difficult to swallow. That like I talked to a friend last night, who I haven't talked to in 23 years. He was a friend from my mission. And after he went home and started ranching, and he said, I wanted my kids here. I wanted my kids to grow up like this because I wanted them to have a hard experience. I want them like this should be hard for them. So they learn like challenge and how do you overcome challenge. And I thought, oh yeah, that sounds pretty good. Because I want my kids to have that mentality. But the more this happens, the only thing I think would really screw us over is if what you're saying, if we buy so much into the ease thing, and I think we are on that trajectory.
Yeah.
That the AI will be, well, I just want the thing that tells me what I want to hear. Like what you're saying, Mike, that's like, as long as I hear what I want to hear, which already happens with algorithms that, you funnel down into the dark recesses of one place because you don't know that the internet is constantly grooming itself towards you and the things it thinks you want, mostly to get us to buy crap.
And I don't know enough about history to say this authoritatively, but I think, like generally speaking, we kind of have a tendency more toward tell me what to do than I want to think for myself.
Right. For sure.
But I want to give myself the illusion I'm thinking for myself so that I scratch that like freedom itch. But like over time, I don't know if this has played out this way through history, but is that how like dictators and kings and things like that have kind of, I know there's other things that play into it, but is it easier to say like, I would rather have somebody who is kind of taking charge and setting all the rules and calling the shots because that's easier. I can still rebel against it. So in a way, are we just creating like a new monarch, right? Where like just ask, and all the answers will be there. And maybe I think in a lot of cases, history has shown like we maybe like create a benevolent monarchy that all of a sudden turns, and I think we say that's a human tendency, right? But it's also the human tendency that led to the dependence on the monarchy. So you can already see it in little ways where it's like, I don't want to think for myself. I just want the answer. Right.
Right.
And so,
well, and we want somewhere else to put the blame.
Yeah.
To put the responsibility. Like if this goes south, I want to be able to say, well, I was just doing what they said to do.
Yeah.
Like this is right. Like we all run into it in our offices where our clients really want us to see their actions as justified. And so they will sit and try and explain like why they were right to react the way they did. And I think that's human nature. And so, yeah.
But, and this is, I think, partly where where I say, I think we will correct ourselves in some way. I don't know if we might blow ourselves up first, but
can't correct after a blow up.
But I do think one thing, there are a few things that have been constant across, I just said across with a T on the end.
Good job, buddy.
Across humankind. And one of those things for sure is relationships. Always across humankind. We've never extrapolated and taken out.
That's true. Yeah.
So I think somehow we will correct back to that because I think you cannot overcome that fundamental piece of being human. No matter how many times I've had so many clients who will sit in my office when a breakup happens, they get divorced. I'm never getting a relationship again. And I laugh like, what? I'm like, yes, you will. I'll give you 3 years tops before you're in another one.
Yeah.
Because we are wired to be that way. And even, I don't think it takes us very long. It's the same thing with porn.
Mhm.
I mean, in theory, porn can solve all our problems for sexual relationships. You just watch porn and it feels great.
Mhm.
Except we all know like this is not the same thing. So
Yeah.
even a sex robot, we know it's not the same thing. Something in our brain says it's not the same thing. So that to me is our hope, is that we've never obliterated relationships
Mhm.
somehow across humankind.
Well, and like I think a big part of that is the trust and vulnerability that has to exist within a relationship,
Mhm.
right? Like I tell clients all the time, I'm like, you'll never trust someone 100%. You can't. It's not, because the potential always exists that they could do something else. And sure, I mean, you might give all your trust to them,
Mhm.
but the potential always exists for it to blow up.
Mhm.
That's not necessarily true with AI,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that you could simply like, it's never going to let me down.
Mhm.
But I think, yeah, there comes a part of that our mentally we think, no, this isn't right. It's not satisfying.
Mhm.
Well, and that's if we compare it to food and processed food and how, I mean, admittedly, we are way too reliant on processed food. I am one of the biggest guilty parties of that. But I think if you look at that same thing, it took us a long time, but I think we're correcting back to say, wait a second, we can't, because I mean, you could take AI and craft cheese slices and say they're essentially the same thing. But
That's genius.
we're learning.
I'm sure the GPT people will appreciate that. He just compared us to Kraft cheese.
I hope they're listening. Essentially we recognize, we know now, it's like, no, that's not actually good. So it's taken a long time, but I think we've corrected, and we
Yeah.
are correcting to go back to where, wait, what is more actually healthy for us, makes us feel better in general, and even what is harder. That's why we have exercise regimens that we're doing, because we found ways to make life super easy.
Mhm.
But people are like, well, this isn't good. Like, I need
Yeah.
to exercise, I need to lift weights. So somewhere I think it is too innate in us
We'll
to
have like a
correct.
desire for struggle at
Yeah,
some level.
we will
yeah.
correct.
No, I don't not believe you.
Oh, good, we're okay.
I think that this is gonna sound all doomsday-ish. I think there will just be massive casualties.
Oh, I agree
think
with
so
that.
too.
It's already happening with social media and the internet in general.
I maybe there's no way around that, but I think the more people talk about it, just like we're saying, in balanced ways, that like, look, this is going to be. I agree with you. I think it'll make a lot of things better. I think it'll make most people better at their jobs. It's more like a who's in the driver's seat type of a question.
Mhm.
And I guess if I'm going to be a speciesist, I would say, I hope we are, right? Like, I hope we stay in the driver's seat, and that it doesn't, that it ends up augmenting, right? But
Right.
we get more and more kind of in tune with what actually drives us. And maybe AI could do that, right? I mean, I think just imagine that like all the data that is collected on us, that even goes beyond, in some cases, what I already thought was pervasive. Like someone was talking about cameras we don't even know exist, and I'm like, what? Anyway, it was weird. But now Mike's like,
Yeah, I'm like, what cameras are we talking about?
so, but I think like if it knows us that well, can we stay in a position of helping use it to say, like, this isn't good for you, right? Like, you've been talking to just imagine like an AI companion, hey dude, we've been talking for too long, like you need to get up and go talk to a real person, right?
Yeah.
And I know there's stuff like that, right, where it's like,
Yeah.
just pause, breathe, get up, stand, do stuff, right? Like, and I think, yeah, that is what leads to health and happiness for us. It's not all the other stuff. So on that note,
I will
it's a
say
real downer.
I will say this, actually, if we've done this episode, I feel like like I'm the Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park, where he's like, life finds a way. It feels like it's all right, it'll find a way.
Well, no, I agree. I don't think, anyway.
But all right. Well,
Mike's like, no, but
Well, like, not to, but I don't know. Like, I don't know.
I think
yes, I think it will. I think there will be, like we said, I think there is the potential for major casualty and problems along the way.
Yeah.
Like, yes, ultimately, but like, like at some point in my head, there's a line from the Matrix,
Mhm.
Neo gets a message on his screen and it's, the Matrix has you. And I think, yeah, like we already give ourselves over to these things.
Mhm.
They already have us.
Yeah.
Except they're not free thinking yet.
Mhm.
They're getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that because we know what we know so far, that we just talk a little differently about that we don't see this as just kind of a continuation of like progression in technology, but like it's a clearly like this really is a new era. Like these advanced language models, like everything we've ever done is based on language, you know, as like a species, and even animals, right? Like, so like it's at the core of everything that we do. And this is such a massive advancement that I just hope we're kind of talking openly with each other about like how to step into it.
Those are fantastic hopes for the future, host number 3. And with that, we've come to the end of today's episode. Thank you all for joining us on this enlightening discussion about men, masculinity, and breaking barriers. Remember, progress starts with conversations like these.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Manspace wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to follow us on social media for updates and engaging discussions.
And then catch us next time on The Manspace. In a world where ease is number 1, now more than ever, the Manspace. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please remember to
Rate
and
review.
please, we desperately need it.